Chapter 28. Sitting in the same cell his mother had just recently gotten him out of, sulking, Jeremy feels his eyelids growing quite heavy on his face. Slowly he leans himself against the rough wall behind him. Moments later, his head makes contact with the one beside him as well. Then eventually, he finds himself slowly sloping down onto the concrete slab he had been sitting upon. This is what the people here call a bed, but it feels more like laying on the sidewalk. Putting his arm under his head, he cushions himself just enough as he lays on his side. His laceless feet make their way sluggishly and reluctantly from the floor, and up to lay horizontally with the rest of his body on the cold, rough slab. With him fighting them the whole way, his eyelids slowly move down until the world around him goes from clear to hazy, and finally to complete darkness. "Jeremy!" He hears someone scream, and his eyes reopen and his body sits up at a fully alert position. Breathing heavily, he begins looking quickly to his right. His red, puffy eyes focus on Aaron, standing outside the metal bars, holding him within his cell. Shaking himself off, Jeremy notices that Aaron is holding the bag from the gas station, and a terrified expression upon her face. "You have a visitor," the holding cell guard announces. He's the same short, hefty man as before. This time, though, he is not wearing his hat, and his greasy, slick black, gray hair is visible for all to see. "You have 20 minutes, he says, and then turns to Aaron. "If you have any problems, I'm right down the hall." He informs her before walking his way down the hall to a stool he has sitting next to the only entrance and exit to this room containing the holding cell Jeremy is seated in. "Damn, am I glad to see you," Jeremy huffs as he rushes to the cell door and hugs her for quite some time through the bars. When they pull back, Jeremy gets lost staring into her tearful sapphire eyes. Reaching out through the metal bars, Jeremy gently wipes the tears away from the left side of her face. She presses her face against his hand, her eyes closed, her lips tightly shut. The tears still flowing down her cheek speak volumes of what seeing Jeremy in this situation is doing to her emotionally. Abruptly, her eyes snap open, and she hastily pulls away from the gentle contact of his fingertips. "Oh yeah!" She reaches into the bag she holds firmly in her hand. "They wouldn't let me bring in all of them, but that Detective Forrest guy said these 3 were okay for some reason." Aaron pulls out one of the 3 cans, and with shaky hands, she passes it between 2 of the steel bars to Jeremy. "It probably had something to do with the ingredients or something. I really don't care why he chose them," Jeremy cries out. "I'm just really glad he did. I really needed one of these." Jeremy opens the pull tab at the top of the can and presses the opening to his lips. He doesn't pull it away until the can is empty in his hand before returning it to Aaron. After placing the empty can back in the bag, she hands him the other 2, and he sets them on the bed behind him. "Yeah, it's probably a good idea to save those until you need them," Aaron says as he does this. Jeremy then walks over to the door and holds out his hands. Placing her hands into his, Aaron nervously looks him in his eyes. "He probably thinks that if he lets this happen, I'll tell him something new." Jeremy drops his eyes to the floor for a second. "That's probably the only reason he let you in here to see me at all." Jeremy continues on. "But I already told him everything," he continues, drooping his head further toward the ground with shame. "Everything?" Aaron asks, an even more worried look sprawling across her face. "Unfortunately, yes," Jeremy answers back. "I just don't want anyone else hurt," Jeremy says as pain arises in his face. "I don't want my dreams to kill anybody anymore, but I don't know how much longer I can stay awake." Aaron releases her grip on his hands and reaches through the bars to grab a hold of Jeremy's shirt. She brings him in and holds him tightly as she buries her face into his neck through the bars. "Don't worry. Nobody else is going to die," she says. "Besides, we don't even know if the dreams are really causing this," she continues. "But," Jeremy begins, but is cut off. "No!" Aaron interrupts him and the guard stirs over in his corner, stretching his neck over to make sure everything is okay. "They're going to find the person really responsible for this, and then you will be free, and everything will be fine," she cries out. Jeremy can feel her warm sadness rolling down his neck. Trying to, but he just doesn't have the heart in him to tell her about the photos of AJ's murder, and how they matched his dream exactly. Deciding to let her live in less than blissful ignorance for now, he decides it is best to just hold her quietly until the guard comes to take her away. "Okay," the guard walks up to them some time later. Time's up, you two," he says as he starts to lead Aaron away from the cell and down the hall. "Don't worry," she calls back. "I'll be back in the morning with more to keep you awake, and I'll tell your mom they have you here." She looks worriedly at him. "Just try to stay awake for now," she cries out as she is led into the darkness which extends to the outside world. Jeremy sits down on the bed and looks exhaustedly at the 2 cans meant to keep him awake. Shit. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the story and how it's going, please subscribe so you can get every chapter as it comes through. Discuss in the comments, plot threads, and where you think the story's going. Share with anybody you think might find it interesting. Until then, I'll see you next video.